First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. That's a poem or a kind of prose from Pastor Martin Niemöller decrying what happened in Germany. Welcome to the Week 5 Forum. This week we are taking a closer look at fascism in the forum, which I describe in the overview as an ideology of grievance and reactionary conservatism driven to a kind of mania. Fascism driven to its logical extremis manifested itself in German Nazism, which replaced the failing Weimar regime in 1933 and ruled until 1945. The origins of Nazism lie in the aftermath of World War I and the political and social unrest that the transition from the Second Reich to a republic, to the Weimar Republic following Germany's defeat, created. Germany's transition to democracy was, to say the least, problematical and rendered more troublesome by the onerous conditions imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. There were no fewer than 32 political parties competing in elections during Weimar's period, and no one party was able to secure sufficient support to govern for any considerable length of time. So you had constant political instability. Into this political and social unrest was added the phenomenon of hyperinflation, caused in no small part by Kaiser Wilhelm II's decision to fund World War I entirely through borrowing. The war reparations added to the problem. And by 1922, the German mark was, for all practical purposes, worthless, and British and French troops occupied the Ruhr industrial region of Germany to enforce its reparation payments to the Allies. At this time, Weimar political officials were increasingly concerned by the rise of extremist parties on both the left and the right. Of course, in 1919, there had been the Spartacist uprising by the German Communist Party, which was brutally suppressed by kind of paramilitary armed troops who had returned from the war. In 1919, the Nazi Party was then known as the German Workers' Party, the DAP, and was comprised primarily of disaffected former soldiers. Adolf Hitler was a decorated World War I veteran who stayed in the Reichswehr and was assigned to infiltrate the DAP to keep tabs on them. Hitler very quickly went native and bought into the DAP platform, which combined fervent German nationalism with virulent anti-Semitic and anti-capitalist rhetoric. Hitler rose to leadership of the DAP and developed a highly effective speaking style that attracted passionate supporters. Similarly, infected with this hyper-nationalist resentments at what became known as the stab in the back, all right, that they attributed to the reason for Germany's defeat in World War I. So who were these backstabbers? For the DAP, it was the Jews and the socialists, pacifists, and the politicians who betrayed the German soldiers on the field of battle. Hitler rode this populist passions into what became the Beer Hall Putsch in 1923, which was a failed coup d'etat that resulted in Hitler's arrest and trial for high treason and ultimate imprisonment. It was while Hitler was in prison that he wrote Mein Kampf, which is German for My Struggle, which laid out Hitler's vision for the future. And to quote Maya Angelou, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. Hitler was convinced that he was a world historic leader destined to purify the Aryan race, and the Aryan race would then dominate in a 1,000-year Third Reich. Hitler was released from prison in 1924 after serving barely a year of a 5-year sentence for, again, high treason. He spent the years from 1925 to 1929 building the rebranded National Socialist German Workers' Party building up their support and biding his time, largely because the economy had improved during that period, and I think Hitler instinctively understood that he needed something else to, to rise to power. And of course, in 1929, the Great Depression became a worldwide event, and that threw people back into misery in Germany and led to the rise of Nazism. We should never forget that Nazism rose to power, or the Nazi Party rose to governing through peaceful electoral means. The Weimar parliamentary system had a fairly crude proportional system of representation in its Reichstag. The result was a fairly unstable system, and none of the major political parties, and there were several, the Social Democratic Party, which is around today, the Communist Party of Germany, the Center Party, the German Democratic Party, none of them were able to form durable coalitions, and that created hopeless stalemates in a country whose electorates had little experience with democracy and little tolerance for stalemates. The result was that in 3 snap elections held between July 1932 and March of 1933, the Nazis won the most votes in Reichstag elections. Eventually, the Chancellor, Paul Hindenburg, invited Hitler to form the government. Hindenburg and his conservative supporters assumed that they would be able to control the Nazis, but their calculations were wrong, and that basically led to 12 years of Nazi domination of the German state, a world war, and ultimately the Holocaust. So I think this gives us a sense of how political instability can spin politics out to the fringes, which is a necessary condition for the emergence of any kind of fascist regime. Based on the descriptions in the text of Italian and German fascism, what were the key points of commonality, and what were the crucial differences between Italian fascism and German Nazism? A couple of other questions to consider as you read and study this material. Was Spain also a fascist state? It was controlled by the Falange Party led by Francisco Franco for close to 40 years. Why or why not would you consider Spain to be a fascist regime? How about Argentina under Juan Perón? Was Peronism a kind of manifestation of fascism? What about the Afrikaner apartheid regime of South Africa from 1948 to 1944? Was it a kind of fascism, or was it something else? Is Rodrigo Duterte of the Philippines a fascist? How about Narendra Modi, the leader of the right-wing Bharatiya Janata Party? Is that party a fascist party? Things to talk about, things to consider. An important thing for us to say what an ideology is or is not is to have some kind of clear criterion for what constitutes, a fascist or not. So let's have a productive week and have good discussions.